morning. Today we're going to be tying up kind of a variant pattern. So I'm not going to ever say that I invented this by a long shot. Someone else did. I'm just using a different material in it. We're going to tie a soft hackle bluing olive. And I've got a size 16 scud hook in the vise. And we're just going to start out by laying down some thread wraps, going part of the way down around, sorry, I've all choked up this morning, the bend of the hook a little ways. I'm going to bring my thread back up a little ways. For the tail, we're just going to use some dun hackle here. Fairly long fibers. We want those, a pretty short tail here, so I'm going to spin my thread counterclockwise just so they'll grab hold of these when I tie them down. I'll check the length. I want that a little bit longer. There we go. And go ahead and tie those down. We're going to have a little bit of a taper on this fly, and this fly is not a very difficult pattern. It's just mostly just, finding the materials. We're going to be tying with an emu feather for a soft hackle. And I just had some, but I haven't really tied with it much. So we're going to go ahead and take that thread around. I'm going to let it go underneath of those fibers, and then I'm going to pull forward to help them stand up a little bit anyway. From here I'm going to just take a piece of large gold wire. I'm going to tie that in on my side of the hook here. We'll just go ahead and bring it back a little ways, and then I'll just pull on that for length that I'm looking for. Make sure you get about 1.5 feet of this gold wire, because you're really going to need it. Okay, so I'm bringing this back. I'm not going to bring it all the way back to the tail. I'm going to bring it almost all the way back to the tail. And then I'm going to go ahead and pull that gold wire kind of out and forward. And that'll allow us to start our open wraps, showing the ribbing or creating that ribbing a little bit ahead of the tail rather than right at the base of the tail. For the dubbing, we're just going to turn to some rabbit hair that's olive in color, keeping with this olive theme going on here. I'll go ahead and this is one where I want to keep it pretty tight. I want it kind of buggy but not overly buggy, and I don't want it to start where I just did, so I'm going to pull that back a little bit to get some bare thread so I can bring that back. And then these wraps are going to go on the other side of that gold wire towards the tail. And after I get back to the business end back there, then we'll go ahead and take our first couple of turns. And we're going to want this to be a nice tapered body. So I'm going to keep reaching in and tightening up the dubbing and doing some tying over the top of previous wraps in order for us to get this thread. So go ahead and we'll just keep going up, and we'll take one more, just dip into our olive dubbing here. Then I'm going to take this first wrap, and you'll see it's not going to go right against the base of the tail because we actually tied that gold in a little bit ahead of the tail. I'm just going to take some open wraps up towards the eye of the hook here. Right, once I get up there, we'll just go ahead and throw a couple of wraps over the top of that. Few wraps behind it, and then I'll just go ahead and helicopter the wire until it breaks off. So from here I'm going to go ahead and open my vise, and we're going to get this hook turned back up a little bit more so it's more even towards the eye. Sometimes I'll reposition my hook like that. It's much easier to tie down around the bend on a scud hook if I have that kind of pointed down, but as I get up towards the eye of the hook, it's much easier to reposition. It only takes a second. So we're going to be using, like I mentioned before, this emu feather. This is an olive one for our soft hackle, and I've kind of prepared it like I usually do with the soft hackle, where towards the base of the feather I've stroke those fibers backwards, and up towards the tip I've stroked them forward. I'm going to wet my fingers a little bit more, and on this end that's closer to the tip, that's where we're going to cut this off in a little triangle to create a tie-in point here. The other thing that I like to do, because I know I'm not going to be using this entire feather, in fact I'm only going to probably take 4 or 5 wraps, I'm going to go ahead and pull some of the fibers off the bottom like that. That just was going to give me an easier place to tie in when we get our last wrap in. And with that, we can go ahead and tie in our piece of emu feather. Go ahead and bring that all the way back to where we want that soft hackle to begin. And I do have some fibers that are sticking up. You can cut them off, or you can just kind of pull them back like that. I'm going to cut that tiny little bit off here on the top. And I'm just going to go ahead and reach in with my hackle pliers. We're going to grab hold of the stem so we can stand this up. Once we have that stood up, wet your fingers and just stroke the fibers backwards, just like you usually do with a soft hackle. Then I'm going to take my first wrap, and I'm going to stroke those fibers back again. One thing you'll notice with the emu, I haven't tied with it a lot, is it's kind of spiky. So there's a lot of space between each individual fiber coming off of that feather. So it's going to make a really sparse looking hackle. So once we get about to right there, this is where I'll sneak back in here and try to remove some of these extra fibers to give us a nice bare stem to tie in. I'll just take a couple of good wraps to make sure I've got that nice and locked in place. We're going to wrap back over some of these to get them pointed more backwards. But for now, I'm just trying to make sure I've got that feather secure. I can let go of it in my hackle pliers. And then I'm just going to turn my vise a little bit so I can see exactly where that stem is tied off, and that's going to be cut off very close. From here I'm going to wet my fingers again. I'm just going to stroke that material backwards. We'll take some wraps right over the top of it, and that's going to keep those fibers pointing backwards, soft hackle style. Once we get to this point, we'll just grab our whip finisher. Let's take a 4 or 5 turn whip finish, mostly back towards the bend of the hook, so it's kind of tapered down to the eye. I'm just going to release that, pull that nice and tight, grab our thread cutter. And with that, we're done. Again, it's just a variation on a blue wing olive soft hackle swingless fly when the olives are coming off. Kind of fun to tie. Really interested to tie with this emu. So I'm going to kind of turn to it a little bit more and learn a little bit more about it as we go forward. But grab yourself a hook, throw it in the vise, and give it a shot.